Hi there. Welcome to Creation Station Monthly. I'm Bob from Creation Station. This is our monthly show, you guessed it, where we talk about some creative topic. Today, you're going to get hungry. And we've got two guests who have never met each other before just now, and we're going to get into this subject of barbecue. And I know you're like, Bob, how could you be creative about barbecue? And I think you're going to be pretty surprised here in a minute. We've got two amazing guests. Adrian Miller, the soul food scholar. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing well, thank you.
And Chris Ashley from Barbecue and Tech. How are you, sir?
Doing absolutely fantastic. Thanks for having me.
It's so good to have you both on here. And so I want to start off with each of you just give us a quick little nutshell thing about who you are, what you do, brag a little bit because you guys both deserve to brag. You got some really nice accolades on this field, and then we'll start getting into some of these things. But you go first, Chris. Fill us in on this.
Okay, so as you said, my name is Chris Ashley. I am 1/3 of a tech podcast called SMR Podcast, but I'm also one of the co-hosts of Barbecue and Tech. And this podcast kind of came together with the love of creating barbecue, but adding in the Jamaican experiences and background that I have. So we, me and my buddy, we've been doing it for about 17 years. I think anybody that's in the tech field either goes into woodworking or into barbecue, just because of the technical aspects of it. We did both. We do woodworking and we do barbecue, but barbecue is like probably one of my biggest passions out there. And so it's just creating awesome barbecue and finding different ways or new takes on the way people do things and adding in all the lessons from my mother is just something that's been a lot of fun. And then sharing it with people is kind of a cathartic way to get over my fear of sharing recipes. I'm so guarded with recipes. So it's like,
Nice.
okay, let me at least help people with some of their technique and stuff. So
Adrian's someone who needs your recipes. He collects these things. Tell us, Adrian.
Yeah. So I'm Adrian Miller, the soul food scholar. My tagline is dropping knowledge like hot biscuits, which I will endeavor to do for the next hour that we're together. So I'm a recovering attorney. I'm a former politico. I worked in the Clinton White House, and I was in the think tank in Colorado, and then I worked for Colorado's governor. I am a food writer, James Beard award-winning food writer, and nominated for other awards. Wrote a book on the history of soul food, one on Black chefs in the White House, and also one on the history of barbecue. And I'm a certified barbecue judge. And my day job is I run the Colorado Council of Churches, which gets churches together to get to know each other and then collectively do social justice work. So I wear many hats, and I'm known in many different circles. And I guess the other thing that's been a conversation piece is I was featured on High on the Hog, the Netflix smash hit of a couple of years ago.
so cool.
Yeah, you guys are both like seriously into barbecue world and everything. So what I want is I want to hear, Adrian, you give us the start, and then Chris, you just jump in as you need.
Yep.
I want to hear, how did you first get interested in being creative about barbecue? And I'm going to just toss out my stupid question right up front: is barbecue and grilling, they are not the same, they are the same? Run with it.
All right. So the short answer is unemployment. The longer answer is I had just come out of the Clinton White House, and I was trying to get back to Colorado to start my political career, because at that point in my life, I wanted to be in politics. Job market was really slow. I was watching a lot of daytime television. I'm embarrassed to tell you all what shows. Jerry. And in the depth of my depravity, I went to I said I should read something, went to a local bookstore, grabbed a book on the history of Southern food written by a guy named John Edgerton. And in that book, he wrote that the tribute to Black achievement in American cooking has yet to be written. Thought that was interesting, tracked him down just to verify that. And he said, yeah, nobody's really taken on the full story. There's always room for another voice, so why not yours? So I said, hey, I could do that. So in that journey of collecting everything I could on African-American food, I started to learn more about barbecue, because I certainly grew up eating barbecue. And I grew up in Denver, Colorado, which immediately loses me all street cred on the subject of barbecue and soul food. But great migration story. My parents came to the South, to Denver from the South, and they kept us steeped in Black food traditions, which I'm grateful to my parents for a lot of things, but especially that. So, but barbecue was just something we had on the holidays, really Memorial Day, 4th of July and Labor Day. We didn't go out for barbecue. So it just wasn't a big deal. It was during the summer months, but not otherwise. So as I started delving more into the history, I said, you know, at some point I want to write a book on African American barbecue culture, which led to Black Smoke, African Americans, the United States of Barbecue. So it was really that journey into soul food first. And I kept finding stuff. And then also just looking at media and seeing that for the most part, all that were being celebrated in barbecue were white dudes. I said, no, this story needs to be told because African Americans are so strong to the creation and development. Not the creation. I argue that Native Americans actually started what we call barbecue, and then Africans and Europeans put their own swerve on it. So I want to tell that story. And then I think there's a strong difference between barbecue and grilling. To me, grilling is high heat for very directly over the heat source for a very short period of time. Barbecue can also involve high heat over the
shorter.
Yeah, but it's a little bit longer than what I say grilling.
Right.
And because I don't believe that barbecue is just low and slow. I think there's a lot of ways to barbecue, but I think it just involves a lot more time and a lot more infusion of smoke.
Yeah, definitely a ton of variations.
Fill us in on that, Chris, because you mentioned in the pre-show about smoking, which is one of your specialty things. Tell us all how that ties into how'd you get creative in smoking up there?
I think for me, it really started out.
Everybody, by the way, that's what we're actually meaning.
I grew up in, like I said, my mother and both my parents are Jamaican, and so our family every Sunday, big meal, and then you take the leftovers throughout the week, find different ways to redo it. So my mom would cook like a ton of chicken, and then the next day that chicken would be in some type of red sauce, and then the next day after that it would be cut up and put on a sandwich. And I think that's very typical for a lot of Black folks out there that grow up in these households. So watching how my mom took something and flipped it 3 different times, and I enjoyed it every single time, was kind of the early start of me just thinking differently about how to do food. And then later on, I was pretty confident I wanted to get into the restaurant world. So I started taking culinary arts in high school, interning with different hotels. And then when I came out of high school, I ended up working at a small little cafe, quickly became kitchen manager there. And then at the same time, I was working at a fast food restaurant, which, it's amazing how, even though both businesses have really different models, the reality is they're also the same, but what you pick up from both is like, the planning, the excessive planning when you're working in a cafe, but then the hustle and the multitasking that you get from working in a fast food restaurant, all of that kind of helped to shape me. And then I got kind of burned out. I was 19 years old, was assistant manager at a fast food restaurant, and I was just like, this is too much. And I ended up getting into IT, but I never forgot how much I enjoyed cooking and especially getting into barbecue. And then over the years, I had got in with a company, and I was a systems engineer for a rep who said, hey, listen, if we close this deal, I'll buy you whatever you want. And it was a substantive amount of money that he took as his commission. And he was like, what do you want? Rims for your car? You want to go on a trip? And I was like, you know what? The green egg just came out. I want this smoker. And to his word, he said, here's my credit card number. Go get it. And so I had just like a little metal smoker which required propane at the time. And I was doing the best I could with that thing. And when I got the green egg, my eyes just opened up and it's like, okay, now we're about to do some stuff. And, and so when I started to learn like the different nuances, that's where I started to pick up. It's like, okay, this is taking 5, 10 to 14 hours to cook. And I had spent a lot of time grilling stuff on a restaurant. You're making like 25 burgers at the same time. You learn how to run a grill pretty darn good. And so, but then, in your mindset, you first hear it's like, okay, low and slow. Then you're like, wait a minute, what's this technique? Hot and fast. Oh, it's still smoking, but it's like a little bit shorter period, different. The meat moves a little bit differently for you. So yeah, so it was just really my inquisitive mind overall. And then the love of, the creativity of my mother that kind of just all spilled together and just got me into doing a podcast about barbecue and tech, because I love technology as well. So, oftentimes when, you would see older folks in anything, they frown upon when the new techniques start coming out and the new technology comes out. And I embrace it. I'm like, you know what? It's smarter, faster. Let's do it. And so a lot of people are yearning for that type of conversation, I think.
Yeah, to your point, there's so much haterade for people who are using pellets,
Yeah,
Bluetooths, and all that kind of stuff. Like pellet smoker is not a compliment on the competition circuit.
no, a lot. And even when I started out watching barbecue pit masters and all this stuff, and I would always watch the show, but I would almost could watch it on mute because I really wanted to see A, what smokers people were using, B, what techniques they were doing, what were they doing versus what were they saying. And so I saw, a lot of people had started breaking out those pellet smokers, and you had all these folks over there struggling to get their smokers going. And these guys are sitting back with a beer in their hand because the smoker's already running, so it's definitely a clear advantage. And, I tell people, don't worry about what anybody else says, and taste it. If you like it, it's yours. Do what you want it with it. So
I have to ask you, given your heritage, do you think jerk is a type of barbecue?
I think it is, because most of the times, like if you go into Jamaica, like the last time I went which was years ago, I went to a club, and on my way in, I saw a fella pulling a cart that had a grill on it, and he had a bucket with him, and he had just a cooler. Well, in the bucket was marinated chicken that was marinating in the jerk, and I was in the club for about 3-4 hours. When I came out, the chicken had a nice char on it. He clearly had been cooking it for 3-4 hours. The smoke that was coming off of there was absolutely intoxicating. And then he would just chop it up, put it on some hard dough bread, and that was what you wrap it up in a piece of foil, and here you go. And to me, that's like the essence of barbecue, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Good. Because I hadn't heard a description that involved that much time, because all the descriptions I've heard of jerk were much shorter cooking periods. So just wanted your perspective.
Yeah.
So thanks for
To
sharing
me, it's at the end of the day, I let people call whatever they want, whatever they want to call it. But when you do jerk, the idea most of the times when you're doing some type of jerk is A, the time it spends in the marination, but B, if it doesn't reduce down into that jerk season, that jerk flavor doesn't really permeate the meat very well. So you can certainly put a jerk rub on something and cook it, and then you're like, okay, it tastes good. But when you really get some good jerk flavor, it has a hint of smoke in that chicken, and that flavor permeates every single bite you take, even the bones.
Wow.
So yeah, so it's definitely a thing.
So now tell me about this. So being in the, how do you create that idea from both of it? Because you're taking something that anyone can go pick up in a grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, down here in South Florida, we grill, barbecue, jerk, everything all year long because it's just that type. I'm guessing you don't get a chance to do that up there anymore, and definitely not in Colorado. You guys have already had snow.
Mhm.
How does that work of pulling those ideas together for you? Like, do you already just have that in your repertoire somewhere, or are you looking at a store, going into the store and saying, okay, wait, I've got this spice cabinet and I want to pick this meat for the day?
I think for me, it really just is just an idea that hits me at the time. So I'm just inspired by something. So when I started adding jerk flavors to my barbecue, it was just like, I want to make this work. Recently I've been working on a smoked chicken and waffles, and and that chicken and waffles is something that certainly exists already. And people have done a smoked chicken and waffle out there, but I was like, okay, how do I make this my own? So I think it's informed by the fact that I want to make my own version of stuff that I cook, but just really looking at something that already exists, or just wondering, can I make this version of something else? So it's just really just a bit of, I guess I'm lucky to have some type of creativity. So every Thanksgiving I'll do a jerk smoked turkey, and that took me years to kind of come to a consensus of how to do it, right? I mean, just try this, inject, don't inject, soak, marinate, brine, don't brine, but it was just, I guess I get so caught up in those things. So like, I can make this work. Whether I can or cannot, I have no idea, but it's just how I start the process.
Well, you got some guts, man, because doing that on Thanksgiving, that's a lot of pressure, man. Because if you don't come correct, your cooking duties might be revoked. So,
Chased out by the family, like, get out of here with this turkey.
so are you saying that even when you tinkered with it, it still was good enough every year that nobody really complained? So it was more you just being a perfectionist?
Yeah, I think so. That ends up being the case in most cases. I think I've have enough cooking experience between the restaurants and all the stuff that I know I can at least make it taste good.
Okay.
Now, whether it's what I want it to be in the end is a whole different story. And, I'm not, it sounds so cliche-ish, but honestly, you can't be afraid to fail at something, right? I have the worst friends on earth and the best friends on earth. So they will support me in anything that I do, but they will not hesitate to tell you when your food is trash, right? So when you can come up in that type of environment, it really, it's like, what do I got to lose at this point, right? No matter what, I'm going to get it. So I might as well at least try.
That leads me right into one of the questions we always ask people is because, you guys are both super successful. You deserve a lot of accolades and bragging. Tell us about that failure. Adrian, what was it that you failed at that you were like, okay, no, this is something that I'm going to change to be better, to do different going forward?
Oh, wow. So, believe it or not, the most failure I had was in other endeavors before I got into the food writing stuff. Cause I lucked out, man, winning a James Beard Award on my first book was pretty huge. But in terms of this culinary, writing journey, I think the failure was, just early food writing, not really connecting the dots and being as careful in terms of checking the facts and stuff when I was telling the story. So I relied on other people because I thought, well, if somebody's been published, they probably have dotted all their I's and crossed their T's. And that is definitely not the case.
Wow.
So I think what I've learned is that even when you're reading something that's been published, even by a reputable source, you still need to just make sure that they are getting that story right before you put your name to something. So I've just had a few things with my name on it that had some real doozies because I was relying on other people. So
along those lines, have you come across something that was like widely considered to be the fact, and then you were like, oh no, this is, somebody's like, that's not how it happened, this is how it happened?
Oh yeah. So somebody took me down on the internet about an article I wrote about fried chicken. And this is probably the best example. So people are wondering, because fried chicken is delicious, right? So people want to claim it. And so a lot of folks are trying to figure out, well, where was it born? Sure. And I looked at a lot of sources and they said it's probably from Scotland, and they listed that. So I put that in my article, and this guy did this real expose. So I can't believe that this guy did this again. And, I'm like, well, you could have just reached out to me and just said,
right.
But, some people are just really invested in the takedown, and, that was fine. And I reached out to him and I said, oh, well, thanks for letting me know. I will correct from now on. I won't do it. And he was like, oh, that's great. I really appreciate your work and all that kind of stuff. So
where did it start?
So it looks like it started in Europe, but it's unclear whether it was France or Italy, because there's some early recipes that say to marinate chicken. But when you read the recipe, so you wouldn't know from just the title, right? But when you read the recipe, it looks like fried chicken, because it's just like, get a chicken, butcher it, cut it up in parts, flour it, fry it in lard.
That sounds fried chicken.
That's the simplest form, but it definitely sounds like fried chicken. But
yeah, and these are recipes that are coming from like the 1600s, 1700s.
Wow.
Yeah, so predates really the recipes that show up in the U.S.
Interesting.
Yeah,
and then you get into the buttermilk and all that other stuff.
Right. Yeah. So on the flip side, what I'm finding right now is that there are people perpetuating food myths, and I'm in this position where I really want to dispel those myths. But sometimes people are just heavily invested in them. And this is not barbecue. I'll just give you one real quick one.
Oh, anything,
that James Hemmings invented macaroni and cheese. So James Hemmings is the enslaved chef of Thomas Jefferson, who Jefferson brought with him to France when he was minister to France, and had spent an exorbitant sum to have him trained to learn French cooking. And so one of the dishes at that time was a version of macaroni and cheese. And but macaroni and cheese goes back 2,000 years. But because this enslaved chef made it for Jefferson, who loved the dish, it's now gone out there that James Hemmings invented it. And so, that's I've been trying to dispel that myth. And I've been on, discussions like this, and I have to make a quick decision. Do I call this person out for not getting it right, or do I just hedge and all that kind of stuff? So,
this is the library. We like to be correct.
I like to be corrected too, because I'm actually interested in truth, and so if I get it wrong and somebody can document it, I want the most accurate story out there, because I think we're on a journey together. But there are some people that are so like, don't critique me. I did this work, I got it right, and they just can't handle, correction.
Yeah, I think that type. I never rock well with stuff so like that. If I'm wrong, just let me know I'm wrong. You don't have to destroy me. We can pull me aside and let's have a conversation or something like that. But in the end, and as an aside, macaroni cheese has everything to do with barbecue. It's one of the top sides. So there we go.
But that's interesting to me, because, if you go way back, you don't see macaroni and cheese really showing up on restaurant menus and other places. So I'm trying to figure out when macaroni became an essential side, because it clearly is one now.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to figure out when that started.
Yeah, to me, that would be interesting to see when exactly it started. And, but to me, if I start a barbecue restaurant, macaroni and cheese is definitely on the list. Macaroni and cheese, along with whatever smoked meat I'm doing, baked beans, coleslaw,
potato salad. And I think you have to have potato salad.
You got to have
potato salad. I love. Yeah, coleslaw is my favorite, but potato salad can go either direction. But I love a good potato salad. So to me, it's just like, would I put it on my menu? I would love to. It's just so much work. It's a lot of work to make it right, and I can make a mean coleslaw, and I can make that with my eyes closed. But, I would not say anything against potato salad, because I absolutely love a great potato salad.
And is your coleslaw is it a mayo based or vinegar based? Like what's your coleslaw?
It's actually both. So for me, when I worked in the restaurants, we did a pretty heavy mayo base with a hint of vinegar. But I think as you start to explore the different regions of barbecue and food, and, so I've settled on, when I do a brisket, I prefer like the Texas style, more plain Jane, as far as salt, pepper, maybe some cumin, and then, onion powder, if that, and, it's pretty simple. Whereas with my pulled pork, I do tend to prefer what they consider to be the Carolina style, which is like a heavier vinegar. And, when I think of that Carolina style barbecue, I like that vinegar to also be in my coleslaw. To me, that coleslaw with the pulled pork is just the bee's knees, as they say. But I like it to also have a certain consistency, and that's the thing that I've always tried to achieve when I cook barbecue. Is I try to hit on all three notes, right? I try to get that tenderness in there, I try to get that flavor in there, of course, but I also want the experience to be the same, because I'm a big wings guy as well. And so enjoying a decent wing, it can't just be tasty, it can't just be juicy, it's also got to have a texture on the outside that I'm familiar with. So so for me, I do a little bit of mayo, so I get a nice heavier consistency, but not too heavy, but then pretty heavy on the vinegar, because it lightens up eating all that grease with the pork or the beef or whatever. So
and now I'm going to drag Chris back to the what's Chris's failure that he's been avoiding here? Tell us, what did you actually, where do you feel like in your past where you had something that you had to overcome like that?
I think more recently is I have friends that are vegan and vegetarian, and trying to create something that I was like, I can do this, and just not really understanding what it is I'm doing. But I'm just taking tofu and throwing it on the smoker. And I was like, of course, I'll take this tofu, I'll put it on there, I'll take these big blocks, put them on my smoker. Of course, the smoke will permeate that big block of soy. And so I'm like, hey, come on over, I made this thing, it's gonna be great. And you're like, oh yeah, this is just tofu in the middle that's warm, and then a bent of smoke on the outside. And I was like, oh my god, this came out terrible. And so I had to learn over time, just like how to actually do it. It's like, because in your head you're like, I make a brisket, I smoke that whole brisket, I slice it up, put it out there, and then it's always delicious inside and out. Then tofu is not like that. And so it's like, so in the lesson in it was like, I did it again. I've done it multiple times, and now I've been doing it for years. And now I just settled on treating tofu like burnt ends. but I pre-cut the tofu into tiny cubes, which allows the smoke flavor to penetrate it. And then I'm also, because most of the times when you eat tofu, it's in a sauce, it's picking up the flavor from the sauce. So I'm now, treating it like burnt ends, because the burnt end sits in that barbecue sauce and reduces down. So for me, it's like perfect. It's like the perfect way to treat a tofu is to cut it up, smoke it, season it pretty heavily, put it in the barbecue sauce, recook it again so it cooks down in the sauce. Now you've got a tasty thing that vegetarians can eat, but it took me years to figure that out.
So I got to ask you, so do you have any tips on preventing over smoking? You know how sometimes you get too much smoke on it and it almost has that like lighter fluid kind of taste. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And I think there's some change in the way people feel about over smoking over the last couple of years, but the first and foremost, if I tell people, if I eat something, I'm like, you got the smoke a little bitter in here. The first thing I say is you probably put the meat on too soon. And I tell them, it's like, go ahead and put your wood on, and then let it burn out. Look at the smoke that's coming out of the smoker. If it's coming out a little bit lighter, a little bit bluish, you're probably a bit better. If it's billowing out of the smoker, and trust me, I have definitely smoked food where the smoke was billowing out, and I was like, ooh, that's going to be perfect. And I'm like, oh my God, what did I just do? So most of the times is you put the food on the smoker too soon and you didn't let the wood kind of burn itself out a little bit and burn off that excess and get to a nice temperature. But you're starting to see more people actually take things that are smoking for a shorter period of time and allowing it to get what they call the dirty smoke. Let it get some of that dirty smoke. So I think for folks, choose what you want. I think if you really are adverse to smoke flavor, pellet smoker is probably more your alley, because it just does not put the same amount of smoke on food. It puts enough for a lot of people. And I have friends that are just like, they don't like a lot of smoke. They like a hint of it, and that's it. And so
what is the difference there between the pellets and the standard wood? Is it something in the wood? Is it?
Well, the pellets come in two different ways. They have pellets that are usually like an alder wood or something like that, and then they soak them in the oil of the wood that they say they are.
Okay.
And then you have pellets that are actually the wood that they are. Now, from my experience, if you get a pellet that is actually the wood that is, from the species that it says it is, they don't burn as long, right? But when you get like one that has soaked in the oil, they tend to burn longer. So you burn through your pellets faster. But for whatever reason, I think it's because it's such a high heat in the hopper as it's coming in. It just does not. It creates a smoke flavor. But in order to get like a more smokier flavor, you tend to put that smoker at like 180 degrees for like an hour or two, because that billows more smoke. And so I've done that. I've burnt wood separately. You're starting to see now some more of these pellet smokers that have like a chamber where you can put actual wood in that, that will burn simultaneously. So now they're starting to, they recognize it's a problem and they're trying to find ways to solve it. I've tried the tubes where you put extra pellets in there. That doesn't work well at all. And it's just for me, my own personal taste buds, I like a bit more smokier flavor. So I don't know what it is about the pellet specifically or the science of it, why it doesn't give you that much smoke on the meat itself, but it just does not compare to having chunks of wood burning over charcoal or just long logs that are cooking the food in of itself. So,
speaking of that, Chris, let's dive into that technology thing.
Yeah.
So, what is your ultimate piece of gear that you want? What reach out there and go, whatever it is. Is it a smoke things in only a half hour instead with some magical machine, or what kind of piece of tech would you dream of that you would be like, this would be perfect for barbecue?
So to me, the number one piece of tech that I tell people, if you can afford it, get it, is a smoker controller. Because even though the purists are like, I want to set my temperature, or I want to fight with the temp and the wood and and I want to get it to sit here, after a while that gets old. And when you purchase a temperature controller, and there's different brands out there that make them, essentially what it is a fan that has a thermostat that sits inside the smoker that plugs into the controller. And then there's also a fan that plugs into the controller. So you can set the temperature on the controller and you say, I keep my smoker at 250 degrees. And it will spin up the fan when you need more heat, and it'll spin down the fan when the temperature's right, or some of these better ones out there, if you open the chamber, it'll recognize that the temperature drops suddenly, and so it'll shut off the fan, so you're not getting flare-ups and it's not overheating the charcoal. Because a lot of times, like with the egg, you would open it, you baste your food or whatever, and then when you close it, you let in so much air that the charcoal heated up, and you always had to fight it to get the temperature back down. So with this, it just recognizes, hey, the door is open, I'm going to not spin up the fan, and then it can bring it back up to where you want to be. That, to me, especially if you start getting into like pork shoulders, which can smoke 14 to 16 hours, briskets that can smoke 12 to 16 hours, I want to sleep, and I've spent many a night sitting up.
I'm thinking you should be asking for a time machine if you got to go for 16 hours.
Yeah, and but with the nice controller, it really makes the difference, because I am confident to go to bed and wake up, and I know my smoker is going to be at the exact same temperature that I set it at, because the controller keeps it there.
Oh, my wife would never let me go to bed if that thing was running.
I have no choice, man. You got to sleep. I got to sleep. I need a little bit of rest.
Adrian, what's your dream piece of gear?
So I'm from the barbecue writing part of it. Mm-hmm. So mine is the voice dictation application. That has just been a game changer. So one that really recognizes my voice and has little errors saves so much time. And the reason why it's helpful for me is for those who are familiar with my writing or don't know about it, I try to write as the way I talk. I want you to feel like you're having a conversation with me. So to be able to dictate that and have a capture, that's just been a game changer for me.
That would be interesting. Now, who does the audio for your books?
So unfortunately, I have not been able to do the audio. I would like to, because my writing has a lot of humor and so a lot of times the narrators don't get it. So whoever the company that's providing the audiobook decides to narrate, that's who they get. So they usually get some actors. And, I was wondering why, and I found out that there's just legal liability issues because my voice is so sexy. They're
You get them. That's right. I'm breaking folks all over the place. Love it.
Oh, that is awesome. That is awesome. So the thing that you both have managed to pull off is make this into a career.
Yeah.
And tell me, how does that work for someone who's out there, they're a backyard chef, they do this for the family kind of thing? What is it that they need to be doing if they want to, quote unquote, step up their game and do this into a more professional thing? Is it that they need to start a restaurant, or is it, what do they, because you're two coming from the pros, tell us, what do you think it actually is to make you feel like you're at that kind of expertise?
Well, probably what Adrian said, right? Desperation, lack of having a job. That will motivate you. No, I can tell you from my perspective, I'm still even just growing and trying to get rolling in the first place. I think what it was first is I had to truly decide what it is that I wanted to do, because I think, and I even have this tendency where I think I want to do something, and then it kind of morphs into something else. Before I kind of hone in on exactly what the path is going to be. But I think figuring that out first to make sure that's truly the path you want to go on, because, even trying to be a guest on podcasts, run your own podcast, attract people, what's going to make, your little ripple resonate in this big ocean of podcasts out there. So just trying to figure out how to grow that. Definitely not being afraid to ask for help. For folks that know how to do it or have done it before you. I'm a bit arrogant in life itself, so it's something, for even a challenge for myself to kind of humble sometimes and be like, hey, how do I do this? How do I do that? Because I'd rather just sit down and figure it out in most cases. But I've learned to say, hey, stupid, go ask for help. Yeah.
How about it, Adrian? How would you get started?
Yeah, so I haven't made it a career yet, so it's still a side hustle, a very large side hustle. And my day job is a part-time job, which allows me to kind of do both of these things. But I tell people that, first of all, just to echo Chris, once you get the goal in mind and you have some clarity about what you want to do, the first thing is really you have to do the work. There's a temptation to take shortcuts, but in the long run, doing the work, understanding the facts, learning how to write, being disciplined, it just pays off in the long run. Because if you take shortcuts, that's going to show up sooner or later. Now, unfortunately, in the time we're in, you can get a long ways.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Shortcuts, but I'm just telling you that it helps in the long run, especially if you're in it to, really excel. The other thing I tell people is to share your dream. There's a lot of reasons why people keep things close, because people do steal ideas and other things, but ultimately you just need the confidence that you're the one to do this thing, whatever that thing is, whatever that thing that gives you happiness and bliss. You definitely don't want to quit the day job. And then I think, yeah. In these times, you need to be active on social media, because a number of good things have happened for me because I've started getting active on social media. And sometimes there are people looking at your social media, you have no idea because they're not really following you or anything. And that leads to opportunities.
100%. I would agree with everything Adrian just said. It just, for me, like I said, I worked in IT, I worked in software sales, for quite some time. So it's just kind of figuring out, it made it easier for me to kind of broach this in the first place because I had income, I wasn't really too worried about getting the bills paid. But, if you're going to make it a career at some point, you're like, okay, let's get out of this rat race and see if we can make this work. And, it's different for everybody. But I would definitely say be realistic about the capital too, because if, you got bills to pay, you got to eat, if you got a family, you got to make sure they're taken care of and all that stuff too. So, and even to the point where I even considered, okay, if I want to make this bigger and really go at it, I'd have to consider, hey, family, let's, borrow some money. Let me hold something, as we like to say. Let me hold a little something to make this thing rock. And so, it's definitely those type of things I have to be honest with myself. It's like, if you want to make it work, you might need some more cash than you have. So, be prepared to go ask for it if you need it.
Yeah, it's an amazing time to be a creative right now because there are so many ways and platforms to get your creative thing out.
Right.
But at the same time, it's a challenge because it's easy. There's a lot of people doing stuff. So breaking through the noise is a notion.
Right. Like it's a blessing and curse. The platform is there, but you're, like a tiny little pebble on that platform. So
right. Yep.
Yeah. 100%.
So tell me about what is the biggest misconception about what you do and how you do it. Speaking of that whole breaking through and figuring out, inspiring someone else.
I think Adrian mentioned it earlier, and that is easy. I think a lot of folks look at like these massive YouTube stars and these massive social media stars, and they're like, oh, it's easy. I just go online and act a fool. And they don't realize that they didn't start out like that. And even so now, mostly it's an act because your eyeballs are there and they're getting eyeballs on these things. And, I think, whether it be the creative side of, trying to get your show or get your idea out there, or even coming up with the idea in the first place, I think a lot of people, here's the thing that is kind of what I mentioned in the beginning, but it kind of informs who I am as a person. So I said earlier that I've been working on smoked chicken and waffle. I've been working on it for 3 weeks now. My jerk turkey, I've been working on for the better part of 5 years. And inevitably somebody will say, like I went through Starbucks the other day and the guy was like, hey, how's it doing, Chris? And what are you working on? And I was like, jerk, smoked waffle, chicken and waffle. He was like, and the other young fella at the register was like, that sounds amazing. Bring the recipe when you're done. I was like, what? I've been working on this for 3 weeks. And I'm just going to hand it to you?
Yeah.
What about all the hundreds of chickens that I smoked and used, and all the wood that I smoked, and all the seasonings, and the headache and the toil and not sleeping because I'm like, I can make this better. I was like, and they're just like, here you go. So to me, it's like people don't realize the work that goes in to the creation part of it, right? They just think it's always just
a recipe's copyrightable.
They are. You can copyright a recipe, but the thing is, if a person changes one thing in the recipe, you can't enforce the copyright.
Okay, that makes sense. And so because of stuff like that, and I've certainly watched a YouTube video, or I've watched somebody, somebody's giving me a recipe, and I've made it, and I'm like, okay, now I'll make this my own. That's my path and a lot of stuff. So I'm trying to get over that initial, you want what I've worked on for so long. So, and that's one of the reasons why, that's kind of the side reasons why I did the barbecue and tech, because it really does help me say, talk about the process that I go through. And, here's the rubs that I use, even sharing rubs, even if I buy a rub, I'm like, that you don't need to know what kind of rub I bought. Here's a black label all over that rub.
And even for me on the food writing side, people don't understand that it's a vocation, right? They just think, oh, you get to go around and just eat all the time. And they don't know about the work that goes into even doing social media to write something. I mean, it's a lot of work. And almost to Chris's point about giving away the recipe, it's just amazing to me how many times people want me to go speak for free, and do stuff for free.
Well, imagine the exposure, though.
Yeah, but it's like, to tens of people, And so I had to get a lot better about saying no, and people will make you feel guilty because like, oh, we're a community organization, da 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 da.
Sure.
And I totally get that, but at some point you need to value what I do. So the way that I've kind of reached an equilibrium with that is I will say to myself, okay, I'm going to do X amount of things for charity during this year, and then once those are gone, that's it. Because I was on the 10 years 15 years ago, I was that other person. I was somebody leading a small nonprofit, wanted to do big things but just didn't have the resources and was hoping to get a bump. So
so it helps, right? Because you kind of understand where they're coming from, but at the same time it's like, I'm on the other side of that too, so I feel you, but I can't help you.
I gotta make the money. Everybody has to make a living somehow.
And for years, people are like, hey, can you smoke a brisket for me? I was like, yeah, go buy it, bring it here, I'll smoke it for you. How much sell you? It's just pay for your brisket. Doesn't matter my wood, my time, anything like that. So over the last year, now I'm like kind of on like what Adrian's doing is like, okay, you got to pay for my time. My skills have developed over 17 years. You're getting something that's really good. Go ahead and pay me for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Experience counts. Adrian, I want to ask you in particular, what were you creative in before you started writing that helped you be a better writer or where you got to now? Like, did you used to paint? Did you used to dance? What did you do that was creative that was like spark something?
Yeah, no, I mean, I was pretty creative, like in the clubs, that kind of dancing. But I didn't have any like serious hobbies because I was a workaholic. So, practicing law and being in politics consumed a lot of my time. So to me, there's an art to those things. So it's going to be hard for people to think of those as creative endeavors. A lot of my time went into just honing my craft as a lawyer and then later in politics. So this was a real departure for me to get into writing. I'd always had this yearning of creativity, and I knew that I wanted to find an outlet for it, but it wasn't something I really pursued. Anyway, so in my spare time, if I wasn't working, I mean, I pretty much was like trying to play basketball as much as I could and things like that. So I never really had an outlet for creativity, but now looking back, I could see that the seeds were there because even at work, like if I was in charge of the company newsletter, I tried to have humor in the newsletter and make it funny. So I did that at a couple of jobs. So you could see that there was something there. I just didn't give it an outlet.
How about you, Chris? Where did you bring back you had your tech side, but what did you do before tech and doing? What was it that you were creative on? Playing in the mud? Did you bake mud pies? Is that how you got into this?
I think definitely made mud pies, but I think overall my dad and my mom in her own right are very outgoing people. And so they've always had the gift of gab. And so when I first got into IT as a help desk person, you had to, learn how to talk to people. And then when I got into software sales, you definitely had to know how to talk to people, right? And you're basically trying to listen to them and then show them how you can solve their problem. And so what happens is you start developing this creative muscle that says, I can take what you just said and I can show you how I can solve your problem with this. And then now we've got a nice repertoire. And so now going back before that, my dad was always a very handy man. So I picked up a little bit of his ability to fix things and build things. And then so throughout the time, it was like, okay, well, I need this wall built. So I was like, I'll just build it myself and learn how to do it. So I've always had a knack to kind of learn things and listen to things and then apply them in a way that benefits me. So even now when it's like, okay, I want my own cutting board, or I want my own a butcher block. I was like, well, I can learn how to make it. And
he makes amazing
customize
cutting
those.
boards also, by the way.
So, and
Nice.
a lot of these, some of these my co-hosts made, and then some of them I made, but it's just like we learn from each other. So just being able to, see something, even when I delivered furniture for a long time too. So, from that, you kind of learn how to put colors together. And so you go into a room, you're like, oh, this room, the walls are plum, and all the furniture is olive green. And in your head, you're like, oh, plum and olive green. But when you see it, you're like, wow, that is a really good looking combination. And so it's just kind of being able to take things in, understand what I'm looking at, and then, find out a way to apply it. I think it starts from just watching my dad build stuff all the time, and then just, going from there and learning and building and creating.
We have the next new podcast from Chris is home decorating.
I don't know if I'm that good, but I've seen a few colors and I've seen some pretty cool homes, especially in this DC area.
That is fun. So I teased earlier about the fact that I do this. I could barbecue out back because I'm in South Florida. I get to do it all year long. Tell me about this. And maybe Adrian, you might know some details better. Where else in the world can we do this? And Chris, does the tech exist to just like have Adrian sit on the back porch in the middle of winter in Colorado and actually successfully smoke stuff?
Yeah. So for me, I think one of the cool things about the Barbecue and Tech show is it doesn't mean everything is high tech, right? Some things are just low tech. And I think, just finding out the best space heaters to use. I've done a ton of tailgating at football games. So finding out which things kind of heat your toes up and keep you warm.
That's not a problem down here at Hard Rock Stadium.
Yeah, here at in the DC area, yeah, you got some pretty terrible winters, and even to the fact, mistakes that I've made where I bought a grill that was awesome in the summer. It was 4 burners, flat top, just everything. As soon as that cold weather hit it dropped the temperature by like 50 degrees. You can't grill a burger when the grill is cold. And it's like you never thought about it until it hit, right? So, you can grill throughout the year. You can smoke throughout the year. I just keep a shovel next to the door. If it snows, I make a path to my smoker. I never stop smoking food, no matter what. It doesn't matter to me. But yeah, finding like nice space heaters, finding the like that stove. I can't remember the name of it right now, but it's like that nice warmer stove where I can take old wood that I've not using anymore, throw it in there, light that thing up, and it has a nice radius of heat. So finding those type of things out there, nice warming socks. So high tech, low tech, doesn't matter. There's definitely devices out there you can use to kind of facilitate your smoking throughout the year.
So I can definitely vouch that you can smoke anywhere, because I was in Oslo, Norway, and then Tromsø, which is within the Arctic Circle, last January, doing an event at a restaurant, and they smoked reindeer. So it was snowing and everything, so it can be done. And let me just say, by the way, I know this may offend some people, but smoked Rudolph is very tasty.
I'm all for it. Hey, I like venison. I'm willing to try reindeer.
Very tasty.
I was the nose.
That's the candy apple part. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I like a smoke ring, but not that red.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds interesting. I'm not a huge fan of deer and meat, but buffalo, I want to smoke. My buddy's been asking me to smoke some buffalo meat for a while, so that's something I definitely want to try.
Okay.
At some point.
And Adrian, I do want to quiz you on a little bit of your knowledge there for barbecue and for other people out there who are listening to this later on. Where exactly is there any limits to barbecue anywhere? Because I teased earlier, but you've done half the planet, it feels like, of research and doing. Is there any place that really can't or does something really different that we would be like, wait, that's not really barbecue, is it?
I can't think of any place like that. I mean, I really just can't think of a place like that. And one of the reasons why is that American style barbecue is hugely popular. So thanks to like Aaron Franklin and other people and people putting stuff on YouTube. I mean, you're going to parts of the world. There's almost barbecue everywhere, American style barbecue. Now,
Mhm.
people may call it barbecue and they may mean something different in their countries.
Mhm.
They may mean something grilling or
Yeah,
things like
especially
that. But
Australia.
yeah, but I mean, even I'm supposed to be going to Bangladesh in a couple of weeks, and I looked at the city I'm going to be in, and there's a barbecue restaurant now. Is it any good?
Oh,
I don't know. I'll
okay,
find out.
cool.
But yeah, no, it's spreading, and barbecue is very popular right now. And again, it's because so many people are looking to the United States and what people are doing here and trying to replicate that. I would say that it's usually Central Texas barbecue because the pork taboo is more prevalent than beef.
Mhm.
So, you know, in a lot of countries, they're just not doing Kansas City or Memphis style bar because it's so pork dominated. They're usually doing Central Texas. But that said, you're seeing a lot of things with tasty things with lamb and chicken in these other parts of the world.
Is there anything that you can't barbecue?
I don't know.
I
If
haven't
Chris
come
is
across
doing
it.
if Chris is doing tofu and other things, and I know you can do smoked fish, obviously.
Yeah, I smoke salmon all the time. I even did smoked jackfruit, which mimics pulled pork for vegetarians and vegans.
Okay, I have to try
Tofu.
that one.
Yeah, jackfruit is amazing because it actually really resembles. It shreds like pulled pork. It, the way you flavor it, the sauce. So it's
Yeah.
actually really, really interesting.
Yeah, I tell people all the time that the two hottest trends I see in barbecue, besides traditional barbecue, is jackfruit and turkey.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
you've
still
seen a
learning.
lot
I'm
of
still
people.
learning turkey. Yeah, I'm still learning turkey.
Yeah.
As far as breasts are concerned, like for Thanksgiving, I've got that on lock. But just taking like a big turkey breast and learning how they tie. Some people tie it. Some people put two together and do all these crazy things to it. So that I'm still learning.
Well, in North Carolina, for instance, I'm seeing chopped turkey. And really, except for a difference in color, you would not know it wasn't pork because it's seasoned and cooked the exact same way.
That's
Pulled
crazy.
turkey in Memphis, turkey hot links in Chicago.
Pulled turkey.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. And
I can see that. Yeah.
And this mimics what happened in soul food. So traditional soul food was rolling along. And then in the 1980s and 90s, you started to see the strong trend towards health conscious or down home healthy soul foods. So people were taking out the salt, the sugar, the fat, and trying to find healthier alternatives. So I'm seeing in black barbecue circles, this is just kind of an extension of that trend. And especially vegan barbecue. You're seeing in a lot of places, not only with jackfruit, but there's a place called the Seasoned Vegan in New York. And what they do is they take burdock or lotus root, cut it up to look like a rib tip, kind of what you were saying you're going to do with tofu, smoke that and put it in sauce. So I'm seeing that in a lot of places.
Yeah, and I have fun doing it because my ultimate goal has always been like if I have a cookout and I'm doing barbecue and I'm doing grilling. If you're a vegan or a vegetarian, I want you to sit at the table and enjoy what's in front of you just as much as the person sitting across from you that's eating like the meat and all that stuff. And I don't want anybody to be like, oh, you're eating like this bean burger. So yeah, you're the pariah, right? As opposed to like, oh yeah, you got this barbecue thing on your plate. It looks delicious. You know what I mean? As much as what I have on my plate looks delicious. So I've always been conscious of creating that or attempting to create that environment. Even to the point where I started working on a smoked chili. And then I immediately after I got to a good point with the smoked chili, I said, now how do I make this into a vegan vegetarian version of smoked chili? So
yeah,
and had that much longer.
I just think anybody who figures out how to regularly smoke, create barbecue, vegan, vegetarian items, that's a gold mine. That's forever.
Yeah.
So my last question for you led me perfectly into it, Adrian, is how do you turn this into something sustainable that goes through? I mean, you guys have both mentioned, I think, like a dozen different cultures already. And how do you keep it that it just keeps going and running sustainably like this?
Well, I'll just say from the food writing side, people think that they're going to go rich off writing books. That's not the case. There's very few people that actually make a lot of money on books. Your book is really a calling card for other things. So that's why it's important to do social media. And then your book helps market talk. So actually, most of my income now comes from doing presentations and talks.
Okay.
And so the way to keep the momentum going, and it's fortunate that I'm lucky because barbecue is a hot topic. So, it got a lot of momentum right now.
All puns are intended.
Yes. But I think the thing that's key is the creativity part is just always looking for connections. So trying to anticipate what are the next kind of iterations of barbecue trend, what are interesting connections, and making those for people. So right now, I'm looking at how does American barbecue get affected by other cultures? Because you're seeing a lot of Asian influence, Latino. I think West African is going to be coming around the corner pretty soon here. So like anticipating
seems like
those
that would be
trends,
coming back.
Yeah.
Like West African would seem like it would be coming back if it's coming from barbecue.
Well, so I differ on that, and I got a lot of heat on this because I wanted to prove that barbecue was West African in origin and say Wakanda forever.
Yeah, I always kind of.
But just the history of it points to a Native American foundation.
Okay.
So I think, again, colonizing Europeans and enslaved Africans adds something to the mix, but I think the foundation was Native American. Okay. So
interesting. I would have thought Brazil would have been in there somewhere, at least with the roots of it, because with their barbacoa and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just the earliest record we have of barbecue. Now, this is a reminiscence, so we don't know how accurate.
Sure.
From Columbus's second journey, he goes to what we now call the Dominican Republic, and he sees this raised platform with meat and vegetables on it over a slow fire. And so that's the first description we have of barbecue in Western language.
Ain't much different than my smoker.
And how about it, Chris? How do you keep this sustainable going through like that?
So from my perspective, it's slightly different. Starting with the podcast and continuing to grow the podcast and getting the word out, making presence on appearances on other podcasts so people can kind of see it. But for me, it's probably taking a different path, which is how do I take my knowledge and the stuff that I know people enjoy and monetize it, right? And so it informs me to kind of start looking at, do I go out and just start selling my barbecue? And in what form does that look like, right? Do I, do like tailgate and, cater people's tailgates and stuff like that? Or is it just strictly catering events and stuff like that? Or is it a full-on food truck or something along those lines? That's the path that I'm kind of looking at to see if it's where I want to venture into. And then from there, so one feeds the other and then turn around and goes back and feeds the original is kind of how I'm looking at it. And so that's probably the path I'm going to look at. Stay
away from here, though. One of my stupidest accidents ever in my truck at the time was a Jamaican barbecue on the side of the road. And I'm like, oh, that looks great. No. And I slam on the brakes just as I'm like, it was just a touch. It was just a touch. And the guy looks at me and goes, I know you. I'm like, I'm sorry, from the library. And he's like, okay, yeah, I know you. Go get your food. And I'm like, right. It was just the craziest thing.
Oh, man, I have one real quick thing.
Go, tell us.
Yeah. One thing I'm thinking about is, I've established my cred as a food writer, but I'm thinking that I need to up my game on the culinary side to create more opportunities down the road for me. Because even on the book tour and stuff, most of the questions I get from people is not about the history that I've written about. People are asking me for cooking advice and
technique. Yeah, okay. I can imagine. Yeah,
I can imagine that there's a industry there for that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a question I get a lot too, even in our Discord or whatever. People are like, "How did you do this?" and "How do I do this?" and "What do you think of this?" As far as and the one thing I always push is blaze your own path, but start here. Here's a template. Now definitely take this template and run with it and do whatever you want with it at that point.
And thanks to Chris and other people, there's a lot of information out there. If you really want to become a good barbecue cook, it is doable. It's just how much time and energy you want to put into it. But there's a lot of information out there right now.
100%.
Good barbecue.
Yeah, just humble.
Go, Chris. No, go.
I was like, just be humble and continue to learn. I think one of the coolest things, the realizations that I ever had in life is, I suck at golf, but I always wanted to play golf. And I just never wanted to take lessons. I said, I'll figure it out. And then I remember I was watching ESPN, and they were like, yeah, Tiger Woods is with his trainer and he's taking lessons, for before his next outing. And I was like, the greatest golfer in the world takes lessons. What are you doing, dummy? And so it was just kind of a quick realization. It's like, that dude is a beast. He takes lessons. You're trash and you don't want to take lessons. That doesn't make any sense by any stretch of the imagination. So yeah, watch YouTube University. You can learn so much from there.
Awesome. I got one final one-word answer out of each of you. Is barbecue art or science?
Art.
I'm going to say I can't. That is what, because I truly believe it's both.
I got you. That's good enough. I'll buy that one.
Oh man,
Thank you both for being here so long today. And this was a great conversation. If anybody has any questions for our guests, you can always reach out. creationstation@broward.org comes right to us, and their websites are on the links in the show notes. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you so much.
Peace.